call the meeting to order on August 2nd, 2023. We have a few guests today, volunteered for a waiver. Everybody else is part of the planning committee. That's unusual out,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
At the minutes of your first, of the last meeting, need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So moved, Chad. Anybody have anything to report, Tim? Have anything?
I would like to recognize Troy Ellington passed back in June, and I thought it would be proper if we recognized him at our meeting. He, since he and his wife Betty came to Garrett County in 1997, they've been advocates of Garrett County and the arts and many different things, but Troy served on this commission. His obituary said for 13 years, and 8 of those years as the chairman, spearheading the infamous comprehensive plan review that we did. And I wasn't aware of it, but he also was a member of the Property Owners Association, was their president for a couple of years. So, but I just wanted to mention that, and he was part of this commission.
We kind of forgot that.
Yeah.
Wanted to say something, all just kind of got
And
tied.
he was 90 years old, which I
I
was really
realized that.
surprised. He was one of those guys that he snow skied and rode bikes and different things, and they were a very healthy couple.
Yeah, I think we've been somewhat calm in the last couple of years, haven't had those big issues. When Troy was here, we had that comp plan that was very controversial, we had a lot of wind issues and stuff, so I was looking back at minutes and I saw a lot of times we were here till 4:30 or something, so we've enjoyed a little bit of calm in the last few years.
But
But
Troy, we
Troy,
had that public hearing at the college that night.
Mhm.
I felt so sorry for him.
yeah,
Just one of those things that you had to go through, you know?
yeah, so Troy did a good job of being chairman when we had some very contentious
That's some
issues.
tough stuff going on.
And we should be thankful we're not in the middle of those issues.
Jeff, you have anything?
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
So we got that, nothing else.
I think I replaced him when I took his seat whenever he could no longer do it. What a wonderful person he was, and did so many wonderful things for our community, so appreciate him.
Yep.
Tim said he was active. I mean, I think he water skied.
Yeah.
It was surprising how active the guy was. We didn't know any degree, but he was a good guy. So.
Fire?
I didn't know Troy that well, but I did know that, we served on this committee, and he was a very gentleman all the time, very good gentleman. I hadn't heard of him pass.
Bruce?
No.
You got anything? Is that, what, anything? One story I'll tell, what I remember, not what it sounds like I remember Troy very fondly. We were out, it was a really contentious meeting. I don't know what it was, but we couldn't get, nobody could do a motion, something to do with the road or something. And so he kind of, it's happened to me twice when I was running the meeting. Bob Browning once did it to me and then Troy. But he did get a motion, all of a sudden he motioned it himself. You remember he said Robert's rules you can make a motion for yourself and nobody has to second. And I was like, okay, but I didn't, just one of those things I always remember because I don't know if it was right or wrong, but he was so strong-willed, he was so focused on that that he just, but I hope he rests in peace because he was a gentleman. I will say that from knowing him for 6 or 7, 8 years I know him. Anybody else have anything to say? Bruce? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. Chad, anything?
No, I think we can go on into the sensitive areas ordinance waiver. So Paul Custer's here. I'll give just a little background to this and then he can present some things. I think you should have had a copy of his letter of request. So the sensitive areas ordinance for Garrett County has a 50-foot stream buffer from the top of the primary bank. So this is what Mr. Custer submitted. There's an existing trailer there. You can see up there. He's proposing a pole building for storage, and it's within that 50-foot. I drew this up. That's a general estimate of where that stream buffer would be. So you can see it takes up a pretty good bit of that lot. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Custer if he wants to make his waiver request.
Yeah, I'd like to get a variance or a waiver. Had the mobile home taken out, it was not livable. And, they had a lot of trash and stuff in behind it, and we cleaned it up and everything, and tried to move the, building as far east as I could. Actually, there's a corner right here. It's gonna be about 27, 8 feet, on that corner there, and then you can see the building. I'll have the other one up here. The creek and the building goes away from the creek as far as we can. Quickly goes away from it. It's that corner that catches right there within the buffer. But there's a well out here and there's a septic system back here that I can't get into, so I've moved it as far as I could west and north to accommodate that. I want to make sure that there's, I mean, this side here I've done sowed down where they took the mobile home out, sowed that down in grass and trying to get some good vegetation there from where the trailer was back towards it. And then I plan on making sure all this is seeded down, grass down. I've got some shrubbery and whatever may need to be in there to accommodate that.
I do a question. What do you plan to do with the building? It's a storage facility? Or
It's all gonna be just storage facility, yes.
Pole building, I assume?
Pole building. It's gonna be a pole building.
Fourth
just for
floor,
storage.
we're gonna do a fourth floor.
Fourth floor,
Concrete,
yes,
concrete.
I plan on doing floor floor, yes.
I guess the only question I have, do we have, when the permit is issued or whatever, you don't need a permit for this and all, without a zoning, but if the protection of the stream while in the construction, the only thing, some silt fence or something like that would be the only thing I could see. That I'm just pointing my opinion. I don't think it's encroaching any further than what
Yeah, and
the
I would,
existing structure was.
There actually won't be any grading or anything that needs done for any of it. There's already a road, see, there's a driveway in. It's just a matter of putting poles in and building the building. So,
I would point out that there is a clause in this for building expansion. Buildings that existed prior to July 1st, 1997, when this was adopted, may be expanded into the required stream buffer, not more than 1,000 square feet. So there is some allowance. This is a little different because we're not really expanding an existing structure. We've got it out of there and we're backing it up, but there are some allowances for existing structures.
And you see any issue with it other than protecting them?
Well, I think we need to maintain as much of that stream buffer as we can. That's the intent. Again, it's a large amount of that lot. There's not a lot of usable space. I think this is a little unique scenario because there was a disturbance there already and it was closer. So we're getting, it's better than it was before.
You're not planning on putting a bathroom or anything like that?
No.
Water?
no. It's just for storage, strictly for
Could
storage.
someone interpret that as it was an existing structure and it's grandfathered and since he is not getting any closer to the stream, that it might be like a grandfathered situation?
Somewhat. It's not totally apples to oranges
Yeah.
because it's not existing, but I point that out because, you know, you could have come and said, I want to expand into that even more with that existing trailer, and we would have been able to allow it according to that clause. You're doing a new structure, so it falls under the general guidelines, but it could have been more of an intrusion into it in other scenarios.
You may have any other concerns?
How big was the pole building?
30 by 40.
30 by 40?
I mean, it's definitely an improvement or wasn't there, you know, as far as the structure goes, yeah.
So nobody has any questions?
I would point out too, there's no change to the driveway or anything, correct?
No,
That's all existing, so that's
That's all
all, it's
existing.
not a new stream crossing or anything in that
No,
part of
it's
it.
already existing.
I'll move to pass through the special exception for
waiver.
Mr. Custer.
Second.
Yeah, waiver, I mean.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So moved.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome to stay. 3 more
Might
days.
stay for a little bit, see what goes.
Zone your field, Bruce.
Zoning fields, we have a reapplication for a solar field at the Garrett County Highway for Palmerino Quixote. We looked at this about a year and some 3 months ago, I believe, and it was denied by the zoning board. They've reapplied. Basically, the original application was denied because it insufficient planning on the landscaping portion of it, and how they were gonna screen it from the neighboring Laurel Brook, and there's some other homes that are up on the ridge, as you can see to the far right, and some lots that are in the southwestern corner there on the left. So I think that they have addressed those issues, and we've allowed them to reapply under that scenario. And the solar field itself is basically the same exact plan, with the exception of the landscaping issues being addressed. As you can see there, the larger circles are existing trees, and the zigzag of smaller circles is an intended evergreen screening that they're going to be installing. And I believe they're depicting those as a minimum of 6'7" in height, which I believe reflects the solar panels at their highest tilt as they move from side to side.
Did they meet the requirements that you were requesting of them?
Well, that's up to the board to decide that.
If you remember when we adopted the changes to the zoning ordinance, a landscape plan was one of the requirements. So
Right.
that's a specific requirement. I think the board last time felt it was not sufficient, so they've added more, but it'll be up to the board to decide if it meets the requirements.
Anybody have any comments on this?
I missed, where's this at?
This will be, if you look at the map here, and in the far left northern corner there, that's Laurel Brook condominiums.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's what
Beside that, there's a little bit of timbering going on at the
Yeah.
entrance
Okay,
right now.
Gotcha.
They're bringing the timber out that they've already harvested that solar field area.
Okay,
They
gotcha.
did get a permit to do that, and which would be totally beyond any scope of what's happening here, although it will facilitate it.
And on the right side is Paradise Ridge subdivision over here.
Pretty much out of sight, out of mind.
You can see it some from Paradise Ridge, you're
Okay.
looking down into it.
I was gonna say you'd be looking down into it, you're still gonna.
Yeah, there's less of a view from Garrett Highway because there's, a substantial amount of other lots and property between it and the road.
I will just mention that between the ridge and that solar field, there's still an abundance of forest still in between those two areas. More where the wording is located, the descriptions of what's going in the solar field, than up just below the homes. Most of that is basically a hay field.
I just zoomed in a little bit. You can see the scale there. It's 1 inch equals 100 feet. So it'll give you a little idea of, several hundred feet through there.
Probably roughly about 400 plus from the back of those properties to the beginning of the solar field.
Any comments on this? You don't need to do any approval, right? You need to just recommend.
Well, for special exceptions, the planning commission is required to, or the zoning board of appeals can entertain an opinion from you all. That opinion can be that you don't want to comment, but you do have a role in looking at all special exceptions.
Anybody want to make a motion?
We expect it to be contentious. It was last time. Those people on the hill there have an attorney, and they were putting up a pretty good fight and had petitions and everything signed, I think. we were able to, I mean, they just kind of we got them on a technicality last time. Their application wasn't just to the letter of the ordinance, so we kind of knew it was gonna come back. I mean, does the commission have any, opinion of any kind of, special conditions that you would like to see imposed? Really, since it is a special exception, our board really is forced to pass it. We don't, you know, unless we see evidence that convinces us that it's the worst place in the zoning district, right, Chad?
Zoned area.
And we've already figured out a worse place than that and turned one down before, so that's not gonna happen. It's a community solar, things that fell under our, you know, under our big, underneath our commercial line that we had drawn with the ordinance that we passed. So I don't think there's really any way of stopping them if you wanted to stop them, but assuming that the commission is okay with these type of things, is there any, I would just ask if there's any other conditions you'd like to see, you know, our board apply to them. I can tell you that, you know, they're gonna, what was raised before was, you know, back to screening. They come out and they propose all this screening that they're gonna put up, but there's no way to police it, and if it dies down the road, nobody, you know, it's, you know,
It would be complaint driven.
complaint driven.
If say the Laurelbrook folks or the Paradise Ridge folks complained that all those evergreens died that they planted, then we would have an in to go check it out and demand that they remain compliant with the ruling that was handed down.
That was gonna be my question, whether or not those trees died, if there's any way to make a replant or whatever, so.
Yeah, we're a complaint driven enforcement on that, and it would require someone to say, hey, what they've done or what they promised to do didn't happen. We would like your office to be involved in that.
Could you put that in the,
Well, contingency
a
to,
contingency
I
that
think we
addresses
can.
that somehow?
I think we can. I guess my question would be, is as a special condition, could we, is it within our power to require some kind of bond for that type of thing?
that might be a question for the attorney, right? I don't know. Are you lucky?
I mean, I would think you could do that.
The ordinance allows that special exceptions are a permitted use with conditions that can be placed upon it. I would say that would be in your purview to do so, to show that, or keep them compliant with it, so that if they did fail to keep that in place, the county would have those monies to do so.
How long what kind of contingency, what kind of out would you give them for the bond? What would they have, how long or how much? You're not gonna keep it forever, are you?
Well,
I'm not asking that
if the
question.
plantings are a requirement, I would say that you could keep it for the life expectancy of the project.
These do have decommissioning, and part of that requirement is they have to post financial security acceptable to the county, equal to 100% of the cost estimate basically for decommissioning. So
That's for removal of the panels and.
yeah, so you could probably do something similar to say for additional planting or replacement or something, and that's held as well.
If I was gonna say, I didn't say, what number do you put on there?
I would say you probably require that cost of landscaping and make it equivalent to that. Whatever they're gonna put into it originally. If they're gonna spend, say, $10,000 on pine trees, maybe that's the bond amount. And or what you might consider that in inflationary fashion over that 30-year life expectancy, what's it gonna end up costing in 30 years if in the 28th, 29th year, those pine trees are dying or they've fallen down and you wanna replant them.
I would just point out that
My concern is you're taking government, you're asking the government to put a bond up for a piece of private property.
No,
No, the
they're not.
government that wouldn't be doing that. The solar company would be putting up the bond for it.
But-
And it
The
would,
property's owned by a private individual, or a
If
private
the-
company.
that's
If
correct.
something happens to them and they went bankrupt and disappeared, the county could then take that money and make sure that it was,
I understand that, but I'm just trying to clarify, is there a gray area that we're not seeing here that needs,
I don't see that, I don't think it's really that controversial to ask them to do that. And then, build in that inflationary cost of whatever it would be on the date that it had to be replaced or repaired. I don't think that that's unusual.
It would just be a bond, and we
Bonds are
we
cheap.
demand those bonds for
I understand.
commercial projects, for stormwater management,
subdivision.
and so forth as well. And it's just something that is put into, an account or perhaps a bank is bonding that for them.
I just point out that the requirements do state the landscaping plan shall result in year-round screening and shall be maintained until the site is decommissioned. That's some of the wording that we're looking for.
But there's really no enforcement except for complaint driven, is
Right.
what you're saying.
Yeah, we're not gonna go out there and police that every month and see if the pine trees are alive or not.
The bond won't be, bonds are relatively cheap when you're talking about the scope of, the scale of what they're doing. It won't deter the developers, but it might give the people around a little peace of mind. Just speaking from experience from the last time, I feel sure we're gonna hear about that. We've heard complaints about the one on 42 right
Is
now.
that their contention, that they can see it, and they don't
Yeah.
wanna see it?
We went up there, you can,
another concern I have is, if the trees die, that's one thing. But when they walk away from that, you got 9,000 solar panels out there. What do you do with them?
Well, there's gonna be
There's a
decommissioning.
decommissioning
Well, what I'm saying,
So there's gonna be, say, $100,000 in a bond that if this company is dead in 5 years, when this project comes to an end and those panels are no longer viable, there's monies there to bring in a demolition team to take them out of there.
what number is that?
If they restore the patent site.
I mean,
how did they get to that number? Yeah.
I mean, how do
They
you get
submit
that-
it, they have to
that
have an engineer has to, at the applicant's expense, they have to retain an independent certified professional engineer to prepare a net cost estimate for decommissioning and restoration of the site.
I mean, I think my suggestion would be to require the additional bond that is good until the decommissioning, and then that bond takes over and build in that inflationary language. That's what I think you should do, or we should ask them to.
I mean, I hope somebody will put it together so it doesn't come back 10 years down the road and be a problem, because everybody that's involved in this play, in this game now is gonna be gone 10, 15 years away from this
I hope
position.
not.
But that's,
I mean, I'm not saying that smart, I'm saying different
We're not
positions,
that old.
this is stage in life.
but that's what the bonds are all about.
I understand.
Protect
I
the-
believe
Not
I've got my
only
share
the
of bonds.
property owner, but the property owners all around them.
I'm concerned about it, if you put a number on and say $100,000, whatever number, let's say that's $100,000 number. Is that gonna be enough in 10 years to take everything down?
That's their job, the engineer's job to do that math.
That's fine, as long as you're comfortable with it. I mean, I have no problem with whatever you decide to do, it's just, I'm just pointing out there's,
Well, the estimate for the decommissioning, it says it is adjusted, it talks about 5-year intervals it's looked at, so it does not decrease the value of the financial surety, so there are guidelines there to make sure it's something up to date. I don't know how much, trees will vary and stuff, but I would think that they could submit something that,
and the other question is this piece of property, I didn't look at the, is it owned by the solar company, or is it owned by the property they're leasing?
it'll be a lease.
Private individual.
It's a private individual ownership leased by the solar company.
Which is Turning Point.
That's why I think it's messy, but that's just,
I think that's what I saw.
Yes, turning.
That's correct.
On the decommissioning bond, do they have to submit that number in their application? Do we know that number already?
No, I mean, I think that would
That would be part of.
That's
the
gonna be
permitting
later on,
process.
once they actually get the panels and
Does it
everything.
name it, does it say 100% or 125% of the, or anything like that, or does it?
Yes. Require the applicant to post a form of financial surety acceptable to the county, for example, bond, letter of credit, cash, equal to 100% of the cost estimate determined above and adjusted by an estimated construction pricing index to ensure that cost increases during the following 5-year interval will not decrease the value of the financial surety.
It's a little
And
clearer.
then every 10 years, our department has to, at their expense, retain an independent certified professional engineer to prepare another net cost estimate for decommissioning. Now, the decommissioning is a little bit bigger deal because you're talking about all of those panels and everything. I would think the landscaping would be simpler than that. You're just looking at those trees and stuff. That's a little bit more manageable overall price, I would think.
How many acres is that? Anybody?
15.
Typically, all the community ones are taking about 10, 15 acres.
15 acres?
General for the panels, so I'm not sure. I don't know if we have exactly how big that.
I thought it could be a little more, I thought it was like 15 to 20.
It could be, and you see they've got a stream in there where they have a stream buffer going through the center of this one as well, like the custard case we just talked about. So this one's split a little bit, separated this middle section, so that increases the overall disturbance area.
But realize this is on the side of 219, the main thoroughfare right down through the lake. It's not on the back road somewhere. You know what I mean? And the only thing keeping it from being seen from 219 is some trees that I'm not sure he may or may not own. I guess like these lots out in front there, if those people decide to cut the trees, you'd see the solar panels from 219. You know, right now today, the way that plan is, you won't see them. But I mean, I don't know how the board, how the commission feels about it in general, but I mean, this is not off on a farm or back maybe in the road somewhere, it's right on 219,
That all slopes towards
towards 219.
Paradise Ridge Road too, or whatever,
Probably slopes
Right.
down towards 219 probably.
because the stream starts there.
It
Road.
slopes to the center of the property as well, yes.
But that stream runs clear down through, so if the stream's running left to right, it means it falls all that way.
Right to left,
Yeah.
I believe. Because that's the ridge on the right side.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not going up.
Looks like the headwaters are here in Laurel Brook.
You could be right. If there's a
I
valley
can't
going
see the contours
towards
of
that ridge.
I can't read elevations on it.
I don't see any valley.
Again, I think the commission should just be aware that, I mean, this is the first one after this new ordinance, so what we do now is kind of setting the tone. It's gonna, you know, they're gonna know we're open for business in the zoning district for these type of things.
That's in town center,
Town residential.
town residential. It's not part of the Thayerville, so it's just outside of the Thayerville TC, is that right?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's in town residential, I believe, not town center.
That's pretty well into town residential at that point.
Okay.
I think town center ends close to Glendale Road there.
Okay.
So I would just point out, you know, in town residential, you have more options for condominiums or townhouses, different types of uses too, and they're actively timbering this now, so other things could go on this lot as well. So I just keep that in mind. It's not just a comparison between forest and solar, it's a comparison between solar and all the other permitted uses on this lot as well.
Right, it could be a ball game comment.
Yeah, so I think it's important just to kind of keep that in mind, you know, as we look at this.
So they came to the zoning appeals board, got it, and it turned down. And went back and said, here's a list of stuff we need to see before you can resubmit it.
Well, the board turned it down, and then there's a year before you're able to resubmit, so it was really up to them.
Did anybody get any guideline on what they needed to have to resubmit?
We had to tell them why we turned it down.
Yeah, they knew why we turned it down, and they were aware of that. So, and they've had discussions with us, you know, in terms of resubmitting. So we've let them know the timeline when they were able to do that. And you know, our advice to them was, you know, why it was turned down. So You should try to satify the board.
What
however
were
you
some
can.
of those items?
It was the landscaping plan. It just didn't provide a lot of detail,
Was there
so,
buffer strip issues?
well, I think
Buffer, yeah.
it just says the solar energy system shall be screened from adjoining properties and adjacent public roads. A detailed landscaping plan that includes any existing vegetation and the type, location, and spacing of any planting shall be submitted. The plan shall result in year-round screening, shall be maintained till the site is decommissioned. You might remember a little more, Bruce, but I think it fell short of that. It didn't quite satisfy everybody that it was going to provide that amount of screening. It wasn't quite clear how it was gonna result in year-round screening, so I think that's what the board decided, was we don't feel that this has satisfied that section of the ordinance, and that's why they denied it.
They didn't clarify what those trees were gonna be either on that original plan, as I recall.
Wasn't much of any
Like
plan.
how big they were gonna be
Yeah.
or any of that.
I don't think we got this type of detail last time, specifically what was existing, what was proposed, spacing. I think if I remember correctly, it was lacking in some of those details.
So it sounds like to me that you can require a bond by what you were saying in that ordinance, right?
Well, the bond is for decommissioning, so any additional bond would be just a condition
Right,
of a
so that's
special
for
exception.
landscaping, whatever, that's the bond. I mean, what other caveat can you put on top of there that says if they meet the criteria that requested of them, then it goes back, and we can put, okay, you gotta have this much density of trees, you gotta have, you know, I don't know what, the financial part of it, you take it into consideration, what we gotta do, decide if you wanna ask for the bond to cover decommission, but also to cover landscaping and anything else you want it to cover. You know, I don't know, I mean, what else is there that we could do as a commission to say, put any more caveats on there? I mean, is there?
Well, there are other requirements, if y'all remember when we went through that to come up
Oh, yeah,
with
I
that.
understand
Yeah, so
that.
there are setbacks, there's a height requirement, there's a glare analysis, and Bruce has that whole application. It's a big application, there's all kinds of
So they
details in
did,
it.
beyond what the zoning board required of them, they did this whole impact study on, based on other areas where solar fields have been installed, how properties resold and so forth, like that. Basically showing that there was very little impact on the housing market and how people viewed these. So.
I think it'll be the board's duty to, go through that checklist, make sure those requirements are met. And then if there's anything beyond those requirements, I think that's where the board has the option of putting conditions on it. If they think there's something else needed besides the regulations that we all drew up a year or so ago.
I guess that's my point. I mean, they submitted all this, what on top of that can we provide as a commission to give to the board to say, okay, this is more contingencies. The only thing I've seen so far, we have to say that the bond has to include trees and landscape, whatever, for the bond part. I mean, am I missing something here that they meet all the other requirements?
There's other things that can be required in these special exceptions. If per se it was a big nightclub going in there, you'd be able to control noise levels and lighting and things like that. In this case, there's not gonna be either of those things. There will be no noise. There's not gonna be any lighting. And there's gonna be very little traffic things can be addressed. In this case, they're probably gonna install those things and you're never gonna see anyone again. They're gonna mow the grass and probably service the electric works there.
I agree with Bruce. I mean, we're looking at set the precedent now for this to be in the deep watershed zoning in a sense. But, I mean, I guess how far can this go as far as us giving advice or voting on something other than the monetary part of it? If all the other requirements are fulfilled, what else can you do? I mean, that's why I was thinking like you, Bruce. I think you got, if it's like a nightclub like the Honey Bar, you say, okay, you gotta shut down 11 o'clock.
Right.
I mean, how do you put contingencies on something that makes no noise or moves or doesn't?
This is gonna be a dark spot. I mean, other than the fact that,
Right.
the people on the ridge may be viewing it from their decks, in the rear. I don't know what else would be a distraction there.
And I think just in general with special exceptions, your role as planning commission is taking a little bit broader view. You don't have all the details that are going to come out in the hearing, so you're looking at a kind of an overall land use perspective. If you see things that concern you, you can let the board know. But some of these, whether it's a restaurant or a solar, those things need to come out in the hearing. A lot of these details do come out, and other issues may arise. But I think your role is probably take a little bit broader view. Do you have general, recommendations or something for the board or things that you want to make sure that they keep an eye on, or something like that?
So this is a special exception. Why was it a special exception to begin with? I can't remember.
Well, we discussed back and forth. There were different options. If you remember the commercial type that
So it wasn't allowed, but you have to have a special exception for.
It wasn't in the ordinance at all. So we decided that we wanted to add it to the ordinance, and after discussions, came through here first and then went to the county commissioners, but we decided that we did not want to allow commercial or utility grade, the very large ones. But these community size, they're typically 10 to 15 acres. It was decided that we would allow the special exception process to determine that, and we adopted specifics. So we put very clear things for the board, so they had something to go for. Before we had nothing. We had a very general utility generating that really had no guidelines. So we went through this whole process, and it was tweaked some with the county commissioners to give the board a lot of direction. So I think we've provided a lot for them to look at already with setbacks, landscaping.
And then, remember again that this is only in the Deep Creek watershed. The bigger ones are allowed out in the county where zoning is not in place, so.
And we discussed a total ban similar to windmills and things like that, but we were advised against that, and were advised to take this tact as a way of trying to monitor it and keep an eye on it, but that was what we were advised to do, right, Chad? I mean, that's
Yeah, and I
what we
think,
came to.
you have to remember the watershed's a pretty large area, so you've also got some larger farm areas and different things that I think nobody really wanted to disallow it on certain places, so it was decided let's have the special exception process. We'll clarify what's important to look at, and then we'll go through that process and look at more site specifics to see if it's suitable on that site.
And I was going to repeat what Bruce just said. That was my understanding. This is all coming back to me, but I just have trouble approving it because I don't feel it needs to be in the watershed. I can't imagine. Well, 15 acres. You think that would be more valuable property for building or otherwise?
Yeah. Why this location instead of?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to talk to the solar company. I'm sure they're looking for. Just in general, any place they're looking for transmission lines. They've got to hook it into the
They
transmission.
have to be in close proximity.
They're looking at slope of the land where they're going to be able to get it where it's maximizing the sun's rays. And then finding a landowner that's willing to do it. So they call our office a lot with a lot of different properties. Now, a lot of them will kind of shy away from the zoned areas because they just don't want to deal with that extra bit of regulation. But they're looking a lot at Garrett County.
With that being said, though, they also, those community solar projects want to be close to population. And there's only a few properties in the watershed that are really gonna qualify for this anyway, because of the buffer, for one, and all of the requirements that were put in to the ordinance to protect neighbors.
Yeah, 100-foot setbacks that takes up acreage pretty quickly. An acre is roughly 200 by 200 feet. So once you start setting back at 100 feet all the way around, you lose some acreage. So you have to have a pretty big parcel. I don't know how many there would be in the watershed, but there's a limited number of properties that would work.
I mean, that's a good point. There's a lot of places they could have went. This must be a pretty premium spot, spend the kind of money that they're spending to get to this point. Why, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I don't know what the difference is, but why would you spend the kind of money and effort that they're putting in to go to this spot if it wasn't for something. I'm just saying that out loud because what I was thinking it, you know, it must be a primo spot, you know, to
Yeah, I'm not. I
put
don't
solar
know.
farming. Because I mean, the detail they went through with their report, the money they spent for the lot, what they're gonna spend on landscaping, they must be planning on return on investment pretty hefty.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there's one right down on Sand Flat Road that faces an entirely different direction. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, I agree.
I mean, I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of it, but I know that slope goes all the way down to Glendale Road.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? So I don't be surprised if they start popping up, going down along there. And that's fine if that's what, I mean, maybe that's the commission's position. I don't know. I personally.
I just can't imagine that a company would spend the kind of money that they're spending just to put a minimal amount of solar panels in, comparatively speaking, to what I'm seeing going other places.
Well, that's what these little community solar things are all about, right, Chad? They are the smaller ones.
Yes.
Does that electric supposedly stay local? Is that what I call community, or?
Yeah, it's somewhat like a co-op. I think the concept, and the state is pushing this, that instead of each one of us trying to spend the money to put solar panels on our house, it's almost like the idea of a co-op, that you're allowing one place, everybody puts a bunch of solar there, and then you can join in, and then you get a discount on your power bill. I think that's the general concept of it. So these are different. They're part of that, as opposed to a utility scale that is just fed into the grid and power for sale. This is a different program.
The issue, one of the issues with solar power and wind power, it has to be used. It has to go straight to the grid and get used. They can't store it. So it has to get used up. And before they can build these, the communities are smaller, but there has to be available space on that grid to accept the electricity that this thing's going to generate. This is a small one, so it's, but I just know that the bigger one over in the other part of the county, they had to make sure there was space available in the grid for them to build such a project. So, and it has to be used right away. Unlike the other electricity we generate can be stored, it's got to go right to the grid and get used. But they tend to like south facing, but like you say, they tend to flop around.
The solar fields now, though, the panels,
Right,
they
tilt and
rotate to
rotate.
follow the sun, so.
They don't like it
template
too
has
steep
gone
either.
away.
They don't like it too steep, so the steepness can regulate whether they look at that or not. But this must be a gentle enough slope that works for them.
You're right, the state is giving a lot of incentive on this now, right?
Oh,
I assume, well, we're not really involved in that end of it, so the financials, we.
Terry, what are you hearing now? Is the solar thing and getting all this money, or what's the, it just made, I can't figure out where the money's coming from to spend on this kind of.
From my perspective, I'm hearing what you guys are saying about, I'm kind of wondering why they're not putting houses in there instead of solar panels.
That's where I'm at.
I think the tax base for us would be better with houses. But, still, it's gonna be putting money into the tax base for us. I'm also wondering what the outcry of the people is gonna be, how bad it's gonna be when they probably already know it's gonna be a solar.
Well, we've already had one hearing for it already, and we held that at the college because there was contention.
So, if we would approve this now, could the property owners around contest it?
You can contest a decision by the Board of Appeals, you go to circuit court, but I think you have to have something in the law that,
Some standard.
yes, I mean, you have to have some reason why you think that it was improperly ruled upon.
Something very convincing, and our ordinance allows it, so.
And I think if that parcel were filled with homes, people would not like that either. You wouldn't have any landscaping requirements. Those homes could be a lot closer than 100 feet. So that's something to consider too. I mean, some of this is just anytime you take forest or field and convert it to some other use, even if that use is permitted, it's a jarring
Obviously,
transition.
who owns this property is content to put a solar farm there. You know, that's what they want, so.
Yeah, so that's a land use for them, I mean, that's a choice they get to make. The impact on the neighbors could be much worse. I mean, that's town residential zoning, and they could potentially build townhomes in there, like Laurel Brook, and they could go, what would be the setback, Chad, 8 feet?
For
8 or
townhomes,
10 feet, I think, or 20 feet in the rear, maybe.
yeah, 20 foot in the front, 15 on the side, and 15 in the rear, and the density is 1 unit per 5,400 square feet.
So you're talking about per acre, they could put, 9 houses, 9 townhomes in there per acre.
8.
That's what I'm saying, there's something,
Well, like I say, the landowner.
put the money to put into
Go
it,
this
to
route.
turn away that kind of money.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't see it, but I just
One
want to.
reason why not to approve it.
Their choice
I mean,
on how
I'm
to
just
use
looking
it.
at what the impact might be.
Yeah, but I think whether it should be is a little different discussion than, you know, we should probably focus on giving the board a little guidance for this case.
Which would be any kind of requirements you wanna maybe put on it. Cause as a special exception, it's an allowed use.
Anybody have any suggestions?
I just have, just for me, I'm gonna have a problem approving anything to
What's
make
that?
this, I'm gonna have a problem approving anything to make this project go forward. That's for me. So you're not gonna hear me make a
Yeah.
motion.
Well, I think the only thing we can do, kind of what Bruce suggested, thought it might help the landowners. The only thing I've heard that we can do is maybe, have a contingency that there is a bond, some kind of, screening bond put up for a certain amount up front, and that's about the only caveat that I could see we can add at this point, that we talked about, so we
Liz?
might make that recommendation to.
Liz, anything you can?
That's, I mean, my suggestion would be the bond for the maintenance of the landscaping as a condition with the inflationary increases built in.
What about the decommissioning bond? Could we put a condition on there, we want to see more than 100% for a decommissioning bond?
If it's probably, but you're probably too far in to,
I think it would have to be reasonable, and it would-
100% is
you
pretty.
wanna think about what's gonna hold up in a court of law too. Should they appeal that?
Would they look at
They're
decommissioning?
looking at it as if they're already saying they're gonna do an inflationary increase, it would, I would think be over and above and beyond to ask them to say, put up 200% of what's gonna cost them to decommission it, because that would be almost like a punishment.
I'm not sure we could do that, because
Yeah, I
then
don't think
you're
you
looking
can.
at all the solar.
Well, this decommissioning, you know, it involves reclamation of the site, but they also look at, every 10 years, they look at the value, the scrap value of what's there. They also look at if they can't scrap it, how do they dispose of it, and there's costs with that, which we don't even know what that's gonna be 30 years down the road with some of the, I think that's one of the problems with the windmills and the solar panels now, not a lot of it's recyclable, so you end up disposing of it somewhere, and that costs money, so, but they look at all those factors, I guess, and
Actually,
come up with that number.
I'll throw a little bit of something in there for the windmills. These blades and all, they're taking down, they're shipping them away to have them recycled. And at first,
They weren't.
thinking about paying to have them put in our landfill. And they found somebody, I think it's in Nebraska, that's actually gonna grind them up and recycle them.
That's good.
It's a great thing.
Yeah.
I think for us, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think the decommissioning bond is calculated by taking the cost of reclamation and subtracting the scrap value?
I think
Yeah.
yes, I think
I think it is.
let's come up with a round figure, with
I
or
don't,
disposal fees, if they can't scrap
Yeah.
it.
I don't know that we go into that in our requirement. That would probably, I would say that we want the cost to replace it, and that's up to them what they
Right.
do with
Yeah,
trying to get some
I
scrap
was just
value.
explaining
Just a
what that
question for
decommission
Bruce.
costs.
So some of the trees died, a landowner calls and got a nuisance complaint. Can you actually do a cease and desist on a project if they don't need to maintain that? Or how much heat is what you,
I think a letter from us or a phone call from us to them is gonna move that along, because they're gonna wanna do future projects with us. And the cost of a couple of trees is,
I'm just wondering, if you show up and say, hey, you don't meet the requirements that were set forward, we're gonna have to shut this down.
I don't think it would ever come to that. I think you're talking about a money-making entity that I would feel more, fear from trying to do something like this with a homeowner, that we were making them do something and that they would balk at it, but this is a situation where they wanna keep building solar fields, and they're gonna be operative over this one probably 30 or 40 years. I don't think the cost of a couple of trees or even every one of those trees is gonna make them not want to do it.
We have
But at
general,
the end of the day, yeah, I would say that we could, if it came to that our county attorney would probably have to get involved and force a hand there.
I think this would fall into the general chapter of our zoning ordinance about enforcement and remedies. We notify them, you have a violation, you have so many days to correct it. If it's not, then we can start fining you. If you don't finish the fine, then it's a matter remitted to the circuit court, or district court, sorry. So it would follow that same procedure that we would follow for any violation of the zoning ordinance. We try to get them to fix it. If they can't, then we can move on to the next stage, fines.
And at the end of the day, we have that bond.
Yeah, and at that point, we would say, that's also the thing, we would say, you've not done it, we're now gonna go get the bond, and we would buy trees, and Bruce can plant them. So,
You got anything?
Little handy show.
Want to comment on anything? Go ahead. Larry, have anything else? Bruce?
With the commission, I want them to know also that we have moved exercise what we believe is our right as a board and changed the time of the meeting to 2:30 in the afternoon, anticipating possibly a longer than average meeting. So we hear about that, and we already did that. We advertised it, or will advertise it.
It is
That's
advertised.
2:30 in the
It will be
afternoon.
in the paper tomorrow.
and I think that's something that Bruce and I feel much more comfortable having in the day. You can always see me up here fooling with this stuff. It's good to have IT on call, and so there's definitely advantage to these afternoon meetings opposed to evening ones for us trying to get them to run properly and having staff available.
So, what I understand right now, I know everybody feels it now. I mean, the one thing is we have two people in the business that know all about bonding and releasing bonds. I mean, you guys know all about that stuff, and it's just not hundred ways. Some years it gets released, some of it doesn't. Depends on how long it takes to get back to where you need to be. So I guess the only thing we can do is make a motion based on a contingency for the bonding to cover
100% of the
right,
landscape
100% or
costs.
whatever of all landscaping and decommission costs, right?
We already have a
Decommissioning is
I
mandatory.
mean, that's in there, but I'm saying we just need to make sure that, then, but I guess we need to say it in such a way that within, we're making a suggestion within the guide, would have to be within the guideline of the law, what the law will allow, as far as percentage of, if you got 100% in there, you wanna bump it up, you guys wanna bump it up, you need to know what that number is, right?
We'll have to come up with a.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're all guided, you're all providing guidance to the Board of Appeals, so
So
I
we're
think
just, right now,
for
we're just
you-
saying we want the contingency of bonding according to our ordinance, with the kicker of landscaping included.
Yeah, I think you want to have a bond in place to maintain this landscape buffer, I think is what you're saying. You want to make sure that's maintained.
Separate
A
bond.
Yes.
separate bond for landscape.
Right. Okay, does everybody agree with that? Okay, yeah, good. Is there any other contingency that we wanna put in there?
Our board will look at the screening and make sure we feel it's dense enough and all that kind of thing. We're gonna look at all anyway.
And that's something you'll have to decide, right?
Yeah, again, it's a very big application. They've got their work to make sure it meets these requirements and hear everything brought out in the case. I mean, they need to hear from the adjacent landowners if they want to have any comment, and from the solar company if they want to add extra detail. So it has to be that extra, the meeting needs to occur and some of these things come out from that.
We're good?
I think.
Good?
Okay.
All in?
Yep.
All right. I need a motion in that regard, Tim. Motion.
Liz, you wanna make that motion? Cause you worded it well.
I make a motion that you require a bond for maintenance of landscaping as a condition to special exception with inflationary increases built in.
Okay, second?
Thanks, Liz.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Unanimous, one dissent, right?
And I would just point out, this commission went through the process of coming up with the regulations for solar
Right.
in 2021. So if there's things that you feel are inadequate or something, that's kind of a separate process to say if we want to readdress those or add something else to the ordinance. So,
I think a lot of this stuff, they like, just try to make it to the point where it's not real attractive, but yet people like this are gonna come in, that's what I'm saying, there's something there. When you're giving up valuable property to buy a piece of, you know what I'm saying? To maximize the profit, there must be something I don't know about wind or, solar panel.
Well,
probably need to
the
read them.
ability to retain ownership of the property for one thing, and to gain, annual income from the operation.
Right.
If you're getting a lease,
For 30 years, 40.
whatever it might be. And I'm assuming that these keep getting better and better, so the longevity will be.
That's you and your heirs and everything.
Yep.
That'll get it. All right, we're moving on.
Yeah, so we-
Proposed amendment to all subdivision plat.
yeah, we'll do subdivision plats. This is Cathedral Springs. You've seen a few lots from there recently. So this is the overall preliminary plat that was approved. And we've got 3 separate ones. We've got lot 3. You can see these all front on Crows Point Road, so there's no real road infrastructure required. We've got lot 3, lot 4. And on Crows Point, these plats have all been signed by Health Department and Public Utilities. Public Utilities did have some sewer easements and stuff added to it. And then we've got lot 9. So there's 3 more lots in this section.
You don't think that. Any problem with these at all, you think?
No, there's no road bond or anything for these because they all front on existing private roads. So not too much for me to look at in that regards. And they meet the requirements otherwise.
Motion to approve.
I move to approve the final plat for the Cathedral Spring lots 3, 4, and 9.
Got a motion, second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved, Chad.
Okay. The next one would be the amendment to the zoning ordinance. Bring that up. Okay, so if you weren't here over the last few months, we've had several discussions about shipping containers and how to treat those. Some different ideas about whether to do it in a special exception or how to regulate those. At the last meeting, it was decided that they would not be permitted in the watershed. And you directed me to come up with some amendments. So number 1 here, I've added a new definition to read as follows: shipping container, a reusable metal vessel originally designed for use in traffic of freight mounted on a rail, car, truck, or ship, also referred to as an intermodal freight container or ISO container. That was just some information I found in other zoning ordinances. The next step then will be to amend the table of use regulations to add a new use: shipping container converted for use as a dwelling, and that use would be listed as not permitted in all zoning districts. And then we're going to amend table of use regulations by adding a new section: shipping containers used as an accessory structure, except as a permitted temporary use under section 157.024G4C. The use shall be listed as not permitted in all zoning designations. That other reference I have there allows temporary uses associated with construction projects. So if somebody wanted to use one of these to store their equipment or furniture or something like that, if they're building the house, we could still permit it as part of a zoning permit, but we would probably say it needs to be wrapped up before we issue UNO or something like that.
Which we discussed
Any discussion?
about as long as the solar panel stuff.
Yeah, I think we kind of went back.
I read through it and it meets what we talked about. I don't have any additions. I think what Chad did looks good to me. So
I did talk to Mike Getty about it a little bit. He said banning them outright, this could be somewhat hard to defend, you know, when you just take a use and deny it. But if we put it in, that's really up for somebody then to challenge it. So, but
I missed the last meeting because I don't see any reason why we can't allow them. So I disagree with it.
Any other opinions? Billy? I can't let you go without talking.
I mean, I want to hear more as to why you feel that way, Liz, in the, at least in the lake watershed, because there is one now, right, on Glendale Road?
Yep.
At least 2.
And it feels to me like it's bringing down the property values around it.
I just see that you could use them creatively as a very modern structure if you know.
But who then becomes the person, who then determines whether it's used appropriately or not? Because that's the issue. Like if we had an architectural side of our group,
Right. I mean, we're
then maybe
talking,
it would work. The problem I see is that you have somebody coming in here that decides like, hey, wait, this is a cheap way for me to build a house on a lot close to the lake, and then it impacts neighboring properties, except in ones that have architectural guidelines.
right, I think we're talking aesthetics, right? We're talking our own
Yeah.
opinions as to what we think is appropriate and what looks appropriate. So I don't think that we can just say absolutely not based on our own perceptions of what looks nice. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a thing that could become a lot more prominent real fast. But
We've been discussing this for a couple meetings, and I don't think you guys,
yeah.
but, you know, we tried to throw these in affordable housing in that category, but the one up on Glendale's $430,000, so that's not affordable housing. So we're looking at it like Liz is, it's kind of creative, it's something new, but Chad went on to explain it has to meet building codes, and it tends to make them more expensive to meet building codes than to go stick build. So, but if they're attractive and cool and a new thing, people might spend that money to do it. We talked too about, you know, that one's nice, painted blue and everything, but most of them you see are just some rusty color with numbers written on it and thrown up there too. So we talked about a lot of things, but maybe Chad, you want to go over some of the building
Well,
standards that they'd have to meet with those?
yeah, I don't think I said that they would be more expensive. I just said
No,
that they are.
we're kind of assuming that.
There is an expense there because you basically have to frame inside them. You have to meet insulation requirements. So typically you're building some sort of structure in there to then spray foam or something like that, and you've got to have studs there to wire and put up drywall and everything else. Sprinkler system. So I think my point was, this is not maybe like a TV show might show that you can back one off and move in a week later. There's still a substantial amount of work to be done. Bruce could chime in if he wants. I'm sure, I don't know if you've had any experience with anything like that, but you could probably clarify. There's all kinds of things you would have to do, all the installation requirements, all those things are going to be the same as a stick-built house. So in a way, you're kind of building a little stick-built house inside of that usually to make it comply with energy code and everything. So that was my only point was, this is not necessarily a cheap alternative. I don't know the price difference. It's not necessarily a easy alternative. There's still a lot of work to be done, so I don't know how prevalent they would be.
We also talked about stacking them. You know, if somebody takes 5 or 6 of them or 8 of them and stacks them and builds a 2-story with them. Well, we want to know if they're structurally capable to handle sitting on top of one another and how much weight and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, people will probably get creative with those.
Well, they probably are okay that way because they go on freighters across the ocean.
That's what we're assuming too.
But
yeah.
I think I guess my other point though is it doesn't prohibit people from doing them outside of the watershed anyways, right?
Yeah, there's no use restriction outside the watershed.
And to me, at that point, you know, you're essentially, it's really just a different version of a mobile home, isn't it?
Well, that's what it comes back to me as the framers of our zoning ordinance thought it was important enough to try to regulate single-wide mobile homes in the zoning district, and these are about as close to it in appearance anyway. It was a single-wide mobile home, and I felt personally that it shouldn't be left. At least regulated.
I think I would just point out when the zoning ordinance was adopted in '75, there were no building permits, so you could very easily just bring single wides in wherever you want. So that probably weighed into their thinking. I'm guessing a little more that they want to have a little more eye on those where they went. Everything's subject to a building permit now, so in terms of quality in that sense, we have a little more control over what goes in to make sure it meets building code. We don't have control over aesthetics, so that's something we've never stepped into that realm to try to decide what things look like, other than single wide trailers require special exception to that.
Does it also present a problem from a financing perspective with appraisals and everything else in today's world? I mean, I don't know. I'm just wondering, does that become the next thing that lenders say, no, we don't want anything to do with these things? And then you have these things sitting there and somebody can't finance them, they can't sell them, then they rust out. I don't know.
Well, I'll get cut to the chase. I think we already spoke enough about it. We had 2 meetings on it, and we went through all them details before. I know, Liz, you weren't here, so I'm going to move that we approve to make the amendment to the zoning ordinance on the shipping containers as written, 1, 2, and 3 here. So,
I'll second.
Before I take a second, I need to ask one question. This has to go to the commissioners and then.
Yeah, so this would be, I would forward it then to the county commissioners, and they would have to have a public hearing that's advertised, and they would have final say.
That's like, I always gotta remind myself.
Yeah, the county commissioners could send it back to me and ask me to change it. They could deny it, they could approve it as written, so they have the final say.
I have a motion on the floor, I need a second. Got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
I'll recuse myself from simply.
I oppose.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Got 2 opposed, and which way did you go, Bill?
4.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. So it went by, and 4, 3. I guess. Okay, so we'll let the process go till we see what happens.
I'll forward it on to the county commissioners.
Any other questions, concerns, problems, Mr. Chairman?
I have a concern.
Uh-oh.
And in light of the great job that Mr. Fike did on this ordinance, I'd like to revisit the town center or issue there on Deep Creek Drive. to see if the board, if the commission has any, I know we talked about it at length a couple of meetings, but I still think there's something needs to be done to prevent that from happening again up and down Deep Creek Drive and wherever else it could happen. I'm talking about the height of that garage that's built 10 feet off the road, right from the old Point View lot.
I'm more concerned about the fence. Truth be told.
Yeah, I think that's a permitted use, it's a permit, right, the fence?
Yep, 6 foot, as long as it's not higher than 6 foot, anywhere in the zoned area, you can have them, there's no setback for them to be on top.
Just make it simple, just making sure the commission doesn't
I
have,
guess my concern
no
is-
appetite for that.
How do we need to go back into our regulations and look at adjusting those, is that what you're saying?
I don't know if there's, when I go, every time I go by there, I look at it and I try to decide what bothers me about it, and I think it's the height of it. I mean, I don't know if we can, you know, it's one thing to have an accessory outbuilding, it's your property, you're certainly entitled to that, but are you, I mean, is it necessary to have an accessory outbuilding that's possibly 2-story or equivalent of 2 stories high, right on the road?
See, I think this is what my concern is that we deal with these grandfather issues, these grandfather lots, and these small lots and everything else, you're allowed to go certain height, or, you know, certain width or whatever, because it was there before.
Mm-hmm.
Where
I just
exactly
think
is
we're gonna open a real can of worms by trying to police,
That's kind of what we said last time.
you know, I mean, that's just my opinion, bro, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure, I mean, I didn't know.
No, I tend to, I'm trying to figure out where you start the process. The process has to start at the beginning where, okay, we're allowed to have, what is it, 30, whatever feet it is, the average height. So we wanna bring that down to where something like that can't happen, or do you wanna look at it from an outbuilding standpoint? So there are two issues you brought up, the height and the outbuilding. You detach that outbuilding.
I'm gonna call it an accessory building, and
Right.
I'm looking at ways to prevent that type of thing from happening again. And I thought maybe some kind of height regulation, and I don't know, maybe some kind of percentage of, is there anything to stop them from building a little house and a great big building on a lot? You know, a great big accessory, is there a way you can look at that? And, I mean, that brings into, and again, I don't mean to waste the board, the committee's time, but we have another similar issue is we say our zoning ordinance does not allow accessory outbuildings, stop me, Chad, when I go wrong, on an undeveloped lot in some zoning districts. So you can't have a lakefront lot and go build an outbuilding unless you have a house there. Unless you call it a boat storage building. Then you can do whatever you want, basically. So, so those two problems kind of, to me, align a little bit. So if we're going to allow you to say, and we've seen several of these lately about people coming in and wanting to build these boat storage buildings on their lot without building a house. If it's, so again, is that something that the commission has any desire to monitor? If so, how do you do it? Do you do it by size? The biggest boat on Deep Creek is like 26 feet or something like that. Why do they need we had one, what was the one last month? It was 50 by 100 to store supposedly his boat. You know, I think some things are getting biased there a little bit, you know what I mean? And I think that, and some of that concern aligns with this thing on Deep Creek Drive. And I don't mean to keep picking on that gentleman, I don't know him, but when I go by that as a member of the board and the commission, I think there's something wrong there, something out of whack there that can be allowed to happen in the district. Again, I'm putting that here to make sure the commission has any appetite for that discussion. We've already talked about it, understand.
No, I'm saying,
Well, I mean,
we just have to focus on which area we're gonna focus on. You know what I
Right,
mean?
if you drive down Marsh Hill Road, I mean, look at the huge houses on Marsh Hill Road now that took the view away from the people across the street that are, you know, up against each other, you know, you could say the same thing there.
Our issue there at Point View, there's two other buildable lots there too, so. But as far as what's Chad's, they went and looked at it, and it meets all required setbacks and meets all the current standards, so we were looking at looking at the standards again to see if we need to tweak them a little bit.
So does that,
Address
so am I reading that right, that the accessory building there, the garage, is 20 feet high at its highest point?
Yeah, so it's a little bit, I put this up because it's kind of a convoluted definition. So building height is defined as a building's vertical measurement from the mean level of the ground abutting the building to a point midway between the highest and lowest points of the highest roof over any part of the building, provided, however, that the highest point of the roof shall not exceed 50 feet above the lowest level of the ground abutting. So that's kind of a convoluted description. So we just made this little diagram here. So you're kind of coming up here in the midway between the highest and lowest parts of the roof. That can vary depending on what sort of roof style you have. And then you're looking at the mean level of the ground abutting. That is the building height. So for a new house, that's going to be 35 feet, this building height. For an accessory building, it's 20, this measurement here. Then you also have an overall maximum. For a house, it's 50 feet, and then for accessory buildings, it's 32 for this overall. So you've kind of got two parts to that. So if you want, I can forward this to everybody, and that can be something that you think about a little bit. That is one way to adjust that.
I think that's
Yeah.
And Bruce was correct. The other issue with size, in the ordinance, you have primary uses and accessory uses. Buildings, storage buildings, garages, they're under that accessory category. So typically you can't put them on a lot by themselves. They have to be accessory to something. There's a specific part of the ordinance that says boat storage as a principal use. So in that case, we're saying it's a principal. It requires a special exception, but it does not have any other limitations. So we could ask what the idea was there. Was it the idea that, you have a lot, you want to put a small garage there to house your boat on it? Does a 50 by 100 building, is that what the intent of that was? So that's another thing. You could just put a maximum size requirement for those type structures. You could put a percentage of lot coverage. There are different ways to handle it.
Does it come into play the fact that didn't we used to interpret special exception different than we do now?
I don't.
When it was originally drafted, wasn't special exception the burden on the applicant, not the burden on the county?
I don't know that it was interpreted differently. There were court cases, I think it was the Schultz-Pritz case, that I think maybe clarified the role of the Board of Appeals a little more, that said there is an onus on them to say this use is particularly bad in this location. It has impacts here that are not happening in the rest of the zoned area. So
my point being is that way back when, at least I always interpreted special
A
exception.
hardship.
A hardship,
You're supposed to
almost
present
No.
like
hardship.
No, you may be thinking of variances. So variances were the hardship, and we
Okay.
changed some things because we had the relaxed standard variance. That then there was a court case that said there's really not such a thing as a different category of variance.
Yeah,
So-
no, I don't mean that, because I knew the zoning was the hardship. I thought the special exception meant that, you had to prove that it was something you could do, but it wasn't necessarily a hardship. And now I kind of interpreted that the county or whatever, or the zoning board has to say why it can't be done instead of the
Well,
other.
that Schultz-Pritz case maybe brought that a little into clarity, but I think special exceptions have always been kind of the maybe of the zoning world, or the conditional type use. It says you can do it as long as there's a few things in the ordinance, as long as it's in harmony with the neighborhood, as long as it's fitting in. So that language, I think, has always been there. There's always been somewhat of a lesser standard for a special exception. It's basically a use that's it's probably going to be permitted unless there's something specific the board finds that it doesn't meet those. Now, mobile homes are a little different because we have a whole bunch of special other things that the board looks at for mobile homes, but for this type of use, there's no other requirement there that we look at.
I think too with that structure, because doesn't have a traditional roof line, it's just a single sloping roof line. The one faces the lake, the high part of it, with the slope coming back. He turned the garage around the other way, so the open face is
That's accurate.
the high part that you see the most of, and that lets him come real close to the road with that structure. So, I think that's added to that perception too, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, which makes it and you can't do anything about it because it's an architectural thing.
Right.
I guess my question on the thing, everybody now is gonna say they're gonna be storing boats in those things in order to get them built, right? And they don't have to connect to septic or do the well or any of the other stuff that an outbuilding that people have done in the past to get those passed. I mean, we probably need to look at that tight because that's what everybody wants to build a building on a piece of property is gonna do now. And, and should it be not allowed in actually lakefront or lake access properties maybe anyway, period, without, unless you're gonna have a living residence there. That would be my question. If it was back off the lake a little bit, I think people would have less of a problem with it. Maybe, but, well, I don't know. That's too easy to get past the smell test for a storage building that, you can have a toy boat in. And then do everything else you wanna do, right?
Yeah, it's somewhat hard for us to monitor. We
And
build
you
it,
have to.
we're not looking in the windows a year later to see if it's just boats or what's going on there. So, once
Good
we
shot.
close it out, it's done. I mean, I will point out in the minutes last time I put, as a summary, after reviewing current and possible regulations, the planning commission did not agree on any specific changes, but agreed to continue monitoring the issue and kept open the possibility of proposing new standards in the future. So I left that whole discussion kind of open-ended. So if anybody has questions or wants any information from me or a reminder about the regulations, I'll certainly put it out there. I think the last time we talked about it, it was very hard to come up with something that was going to achieve what we wanted, but I think I look at the matter as still open, that everybody can contribute or ask questions, and I'll give you information.
The boat storage building issue is similar, but not the same. They're two different
Yeah.
issues there, you know what I mean? But
Well, the other thing too, we keep talking and it goes back to what I've heard, people just don't like the looks of it. The look that's created there on that specific one. And you talked about the ones on Marsh Hill Road and everything. So in order to control looks, you gotta go back to aesthetic zoning, right?
I think that's part of it. I think that's a factor. I think the size is kind of a separate issue. We see some very big accessory buildings, and again, we ask the people what they're used for. If they say it says private residential and I store things in it, there's a limit to how much we can push there, and we're not looking in the windows. So that's I think one issue is how big's too big on an accessory building. Should that be tied to the size of the lot or something? That's one issue, and then the aesthetic issue is another one, that if we just don't
Right,
like
I
the
think
look, that's hard to break.
That puts more, that's gonna put, in some places, I know I'm going through plan review now and another place for a friend. The plan review goes through all that stuff. I know we don't go down much detail here, I understand that, but when that plan's permitted, you have an elevation, this girl, I do all these planning, elevation, whole 9 yards. Then I went to the permit office, but also went to the HOA, so everybody approved, had approval of that, and they'd say, oh, we don't agree, like we're doing right now, they vote and say, oh, that building's too big for that, whatever. But that's control, that's what I say about aesthetic zoning, that's completely different than what we're dealing with as far as size. So we can deal with that, unless you wanna entertain looking at aesthetic zoning or something.
absolutely not.
Well, I mean, we just did that with the containers, so,
What's that?
so we just did that with the containers, so, basically.
What's that?
We just basically did that with the,
Oh,
you
right,
know,
right.
prohibiting the container, so why wouldn't we go in and do the height?
I'm just, all I'm gonna throw stuff out, I mean, I know what's legal, what's not when it comes to this stuff. All I'm saying is, you're talking about, we don't like the looks of what happened there.
Right,
It's like we didn't like, evidently, we voted not to like the container on it.
right.
And we can put out, that's right, we can go out and say, we don't like this guy, we're gonna pick each individual home, or you're gonna try to do it raw brush.
I mean, to me, you can't do it for height,
I don't think you can do it, I mean, that's my
we're
opinion.
way
It's
too
hard,
far
what we have
into
right
it.
now, it's almost impossible to do unless you go back down to the zoning ordinance and take specifically what you wanna control,
Right.
and then change it, and then amend it there. And I
I
think
don't
that's the
know
only way you can do it.
I think that what happened there, it took away a view that a lot of people that love Deep Creek loved. And so it's, we might not like the way it looks, but if they followed what they had to follow, I don't think there's anything we can do about it. But we should go back and look at what we have now, especially on some of that. I mean, how close that is to the road, I wouldn't even wanna take the risk of having my structure that close, but that's neither here nor there.
And I think, going off of what you're saying right there, I don't disagree that, you know, I've wondered for a long time, this whole thing with in the town center zoning situation, if we shouldn't be re-looking at setbacks and stuff in there now, because, you know, especially if somebody's coming in and doing a business, and they can put a business 8 feet away from somebody's lot, or, you know, enough of it's developed now at this point. Should we be re-looking at that because of that garage? And that's another example. You want garages that are, you know, that close to the roads.
Right.
You know, I mean, somebody misses a little bit there, they're gonna be inside that garage.
We were talking about snow removal when the snow plow's going by there.
That thing's gonna rust out.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna hit the fence first, but they'll probably tear the
it's
fence
gonna
down.
knock it right down the road. You know, maybe we should be, well, I thought for a long time we should relook at the whole town center thing anyways.
I mean, we've done things like this in the past. We've looked at other jurisdictions. And, I mean, is it worth, Chad, looking at some other resort communities with
We could, yeah,
how
I could
they
try to look at
how
that.
they
and
look
that.
at heights and setbacks and stuff, and whether
Yeah, just
Then you go back
could
to,
that be a good challenge?
you go back to Hilton Head, you go to a place like that, you thought it's all aesthetic zoning. Your signs are only this high, your house is only this high. You go to your community down there in Florida, Billy, it's all controlled by,
Yeah, and you're never gonna be able to,
And we are
it's
for
way out of that part, but there are things though that I do think really.
And
could
town
use a
center
good-
allows for residential and commercial, and this happened to be a residential in Color Eye.
And it could turn into a commercial tomorrow,
Right.
right? Who knows what they would do in there?
right?
Of course, they wouldn't have any parking, but,
yeah, town center setbacks are 10-foot front, 8-foot side, and 20-foot rear. So that's
and
for
the rear is the lakeside, basically, if it's lakeside.
yes, rear's lakeside, and then if it's an accessory building, you still maintain the front. Always, that's gonna be 10. Then you go within 5 foot of the side and rear in town center. So very lenient setbacks in town center.
Yeah.
Which that is the area where you have public water and sewer, and you want to put more in there because you have the infrastructure for it. But you know whether that's too close is something we can all
look
discuss.
at some of the height language.
Yeah, I'll send that to everybody, and then they can look at
Height
it.
and the size or a percentage of the lot or in reference to the house. I mean, I'll just say to you, and I may have my definitions wrong and I may be mixing my opinion in here, but when I go down Deep Creek Drive, there is plenty of garages right near as close to the road as that, as you go down there. And they don't stick out at you, they don't catch your eye at all. The thing that I think catches your eye and creates the issue is the height of that thing. You know what I mean? And the size of it compared to the house and that. So that's why I said, I don't know that there's a way to look at the size of it, both height and size, footprint of it.
Could it?
There's no way that the same, so well, it doesn't, I guess, because you said a garage can't be higher than 20 feet. There's no way that garage is only 20 feet high at the highest point, but that's because
Was 20 foot from the mean level
yeah.
to the midpoint. That's 32
So
overall.
maybe that needs to be looked at on accessory buildings. I'm not sure. But when you talk about aesthetic zoning, I think you're talking about color and style of roof and things like that. I have no desire to.
Well, okay, but the style of that building bothers people.
The size of it bothers you. I mean, again, I'm mixing my opinion in here, but I think it's,
I'm
when I go
looking
by there, I
at
try
it.
to decide what makes that stick out to me. I think it's the height and the size of it compared to the lot.
I'm just looking at it from the standpoint, if you're gonna regulate it, how do you have to regulate it? That's all I'm saying. And I think the only way you're gonna regulate some of this stuff on these town center lots that are small and tight is to have some kind of plan review that says, you know, but we don't have aesthetic zoning, so, you know, you don't have a board that sets and does that. Okay,
It
this-
seems to
this
me
need-
that it would be, like as an example, the setbacks, the 20-foot rear and the 20-foot front, or the 10-foot front, should almost be the minimum reversed. because what's on the rear, who cares? Almost, you know, I mean, if it's on the lakeside, it's not gonna hurt it if it's 10 feet from the buffer strip, because it's still gonna be so many feet from the lake. And if it's 20 feet from the road, it makes it probably at least safer and less of an issue. And, you know, while you're at it, maybe refresh the side setbacks so that they're not so imposing. Because what's happened when all this was done, you know, was because of, you know, there was 14 units could be put in an acre lot. I remember when I started, then it got reduced to 10. But still, I mean, you know, is that what is really, and remember back then when they were at 10, most of those places were trailer parks and stuff like that converted into condos, so everybody was getting docks left. That's not happening anymore. I mean, you know, if you have a 100-foot lot, you're getting one dock. So I just wonder, we should do a deep dive on that before you get 5 more of those kind of things happen, where somebody's doing a rental house and throws one of those things back there in the back, and you know, and then on top of that, we've got 10 cars parked in the driveway, so there's not one tree even capable of being on the lot. Which,
one more thing to complicate the issue a little bit. I've been contacted by estate planning a little bit with the concept of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. That's kind of a hot topic now, which basically is the idea of potentially forcing jurisdictions to allow an accessory dwelling unit on each lot, where you would be able to build a small accessory house on each lot, and that they may usurp local planning to require that. My reply was, you know, I think the concept is that would be a more affordable choice. You may be able to allow a child to live there on the property with you, and it would maybe help with affordable housing. I brought out the point that, you know, most of our areas that are non-zoned or larger areas where I don't know that it's going to be an issue, the area where we would be perhaps increasing our density are areas where people have vacation homes. I don't know that we would be helping with affordable housing. We may just be doubling the number of rental units in the lake or so. So I don't know where that's going to go. I think the state has formed a ADU task force, and I'd heard rumblings that it may be something where they just say, you've got to do it, you don't have any choice. So that may come into this discussion as we're looking at these accessory buildings that we've always allowed. If they're accessory and are not a house, they have a little more lenient setbacks. You know, could these be then converted into accessory dwellings, and will we be able to control them? So, just something to keep in mind. Yes.
How do you want to proceed? Do you want to come back with some recommendations, or do you want to?
I can try to look into some other jurisdictions and see if they regulate or have anything specifically with accessory setbacks, or just the way they look at those, and share that with the group.
Is that okay with you? Okay, everybody
Well,
good with
it's up
that?
to the commission, I'm just bringing it.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
And I forwarded kind of that little handout on accessory buildings. Does everybody still have that?
Yeah.
Or do they want that again? I mean, that was where I tried to put together some of the existing regulations, but I'll send the height handout as well. And if anybody has any specifics that they see somewhere else, let me know.
Anything else? We're good? Meeting adjourned,
Yes.
September 6th.
Or Chad will give you something to do every meeting.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else to do, so. I always like when you guys give me homework.
Yeah. We went all them years without giving you any
I know.
Sorry, Chad.
Not used to sitting that long, are we? Get up all stiff and sore. Yeah, from the use of half hour.
Thank you.
Has a bear on the.
Yeah, well, I got another meeting.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep. Okay, I
See
need
you, Tony.
See you, Timmy.
let me shut this down before.
It wasn't too rough on the container. We already.
Now, the Mylar, they use this one, right?
Right.